The absolutely goated amongst you may recall that at the beginning of last year, 2025, in the year of our Lord Talos, I put out a video talking about the variety of TTRPGs I wanted to play and run. That video is going to appear in a corner up there for you to go and watch if that sort of thing interests you, and if you're interested what a world looked like when your launch saver had a much larger beard. But we're not talking about my facial hair, we're talking about a TTRPG I mentioned in the aforementioned video that got me particularly excited for a whole host of different reasons. The TTRPG in question being Helluva Town, developed by Archean Games, or Archean Games, I'm not quite too sure the pronunciation there. They're based in Italy, and they developed a TTRPG where you play as cartoon gangsters set in a New York setting in the 1930s, that setting being the titular Helluva Town. So you've got this very interesting juxtaposition between cute and cuddly cartoon characters and the more hard-hitting mature setting of gangsters in 1930s New York. The artwork is fantastic as well. It was done by Sean Dickinson, who's the same guy who did all the artwork for Cuphead. In fact, all the artwork in this book is done by Sean Dickinson as well, so there's a lot to get invested in from the get-go. The mechanics I feel are really simple, fun and engaging to play around with as well, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. There's a far more emotional and personal investment that's really got me engaged with this TTRPG. Beyond the fact that I spent $125 in the Kickstarter process, but that's a conversation for a different time. During the crowdfunding process in the summer of 2024, in the year of our Lord Talos, Archean Games had a little competition where people could write in like a 500 or 550 word prompt that would be an adventure hook, that 3 winners would have their ideas developed into fully fledged adventures that would be found within the core book, which I thought was a really cool thing indeed. And also it was not going to be nice, it was going to be like a cash sum prize for that as well. Now, honestly, I wasn't interested in the money when I decided to go and write a little idea for that. I had been debating wanting to get into more TTRPG writing for some time, and this to me seemed like a really fucking cool way of doing that, and just to getting my name out there, just to show what I can do, big, small, or otherwise. Now, I didn't win first, second, or third prize. I didn't get any money for it, but my ideas and a bunch of others that other people had written were included within the art book, which I think is a really fucking cool thing, honestly. In fact, mine's actually the very first one in the book, which is probably a huge coincidence, but there is a little bragging right to be had there, you have to admit. And anyway, that aside, I'm just really shocked and surprised that mine was included all the same, because I don't think they included everyone's, because there's a lot of people that did write adventures for the setting. And I'm just really proud of my little contribution, and in some sense what I've provided is considered canon material now, because there was a character or two that I've mentioned in here, and I wanted to do a video when I first heard about this game, like how to run and how to play it, because it just seemed like a really fun thing to do indeed. But with this opportunity here, what if I actually told you how to run it using my adventure as a leaping off point? Because remember, it's just the adventure hook that's in here. It's not developed into a fully fledged campaign. So you could take what's in here and do your own thing with it, as you can do with anybody else's ideas within this book. But what if the author of said TTRPG adventure hook would develop it just to see what he would do with it? I think that'd be a very nice little twist to the established how to run TTRPG formula that I've been doing over the last couple of years. And in many ways, I think this offers a lot more freedom for me to do what I want, because it's not bound so much into an established timeline and canonical events found within like the 3 published adventures in the core book. I can do whatever I want with this, and you can do whatever you want with it as well. So I think that'll be a very fun little thing to do as we learn together how to run and play Helluva Town by Archean Games, and also see how I put together a campaign, or one-shot, or whatever it turns out to be, using my very own written adventure hook thing. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So stick around and find out how to play Helluva Town! As mentioned already, Helluva Town is a cartoon gangster RPG. On the one hand, you have the very mature, serious conversations that's to do with alcohol, drug addiction, gambling, prostitution, i.e. the sex trade, smoking, and all those little fun things and pieces. And on the other hand, you have the chaotic pandemonium fuckfest that is Cartoon Logic, so classic cartoons are like Betty Boop, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Cuphead, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, coming together with a more serious subject matter in a chaotic orgy that players are going to take full exploitation of and tearing any campaigns that the animator, the games master, is going to set up. So it makes sense that Helluva Town has a really simple system that focuses more on the concept of rulings rather than rules. And in fact, Helluva Town doesn't actually have many rules in the first place. As such, Helluva Town's system relies on a pack of cards rather than your standard dice, which some people may get turned off by, but using cards is actually a really nice idea because it makes it far more accessible. It's easier to teach people because people are not going to be so weirded out by these weird procedural little bits of plastic on the table. Everybody's got at least one pack of cards in a household, and also it's the players that draw the cards, not the animators. So if you're teaching somebody, you give them the pack of cards, have them draw the cards and read the numbers, which is basically the system in a fucking nutshell. But cartoon characters, which can take on a whole variety of different forms, is basically anything that your imagination can come up with, are derived in 4 basic stats: touchy, feely, handy, and loony. Touchy is sort of like your physical strength sort of things. Feely is like your speaking and empathy sort of stat. Handy is like the more dexterity based sort of things. And loony is like just out bonkers, silly cartoon nonsense. So an example of that, you're trapped in a room and you're going to squeeze through the keyhole to get out. That sort of thing. And each of these are also represented by a different face of a card. Diamonds are represented with touchy stats. Hearts is your feely stat, as you may think. Clubs is your handy stat. And spade is your loony stat, and they also have a colour associated with them. Touchy is green, red is feely, blue is handy, and yellow is loony. And you may be wondering why that is, because the special Helluva Town playing cards, which you've probably been sitting over there for some time, are colour-coded. But it doesn't really matter if you don't have like a colour-coded set, you can use any set of playing cards with that. So how does it all work really? Well, you take out your deck of cards and you keep the jokers in, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and you draw 2 cards. Add them to your particular stat, and Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. That's the game system as a whole. So I'll just prove this, how simple this is. I'm just shuffling the deck, and let us say... Actually, let's use the example I just used a moment ago. My character, Jim Jam Dodger, is trapped in a prison cell, and they really need to get out because there's a hit that they need to go to, otherwise they're going to incur more debt from their boss. So let's just say that Jim Jam Dodger has 2 stats in loony, and they're going to squeeze out through the keyhole, jam first, and then the rest of their biscuit is going to be crumbling right through. So I have my deck on the table there, and I draw 2 cards. Now, before I draw my cards, I should really talk about the difficulty value. You're mostly going to be looking at a difficulty value of 10, and if it's going to be a bit more difficult than that, you add them up in increments of 5. And I'm going to say, just to make things really stereotypical, it's like a classic American prison cell, like the irons jail bar things, 1 bed, a big old fat keyhole, and we're going to squeeze on right through that. And I'm actually going to say that this is a intermediate difficulty value, so that's going to be 15. So I'm going to draw 2 cards, add my loony stat to that, and hopefully we're going to get higher than 15. So my first card is the 10 of spades, which is just blue matching up with the handy stat. That is the Queen of Clubs. So, and you can count the faces as well. So a Jack would be 11, Queen would be 12, and King would be 13. Plus my 2 is a high number, because I can't do maths. That's 25 if I've done that correctly, which is pretty impressive, meaning I get through that keyhole with no issue at all, just in and out like butter, not touching the sides. But there's an additional thing I have to take into consideration, because if you get so many numbers higher than the successes, you gain additional benefits. So in this instance, we have 10 points higher than the difficulty value, because we were looking for 15, we got 25, so that is known as an incredible success. So it's 15 points higher, and I'm referring to the animator screen, which is why I'm looking down and over there. The toon success is so great that it goes to the head. The toon can gain extra bucks if the scene allows, and is no longer tuned out if applicable. What does tuned out mean? It basically is a state of being where they feel like sort of nauseous, headachy, basically all the symptoms of being hung over and a migraine all packaged into one. It's usually associated of having too much ink to drink, but there are other instances where your character get tuned out, which basically, mechanically speaking, rather than drawing 2 cards, you draw out 1, and then after a certain amount of time, you're no longer to be considered to tune out. Money in this instance, I don't think would apply, but I could rule it as the animator. As you squeeze out, you're able just to pull out a handful of bucks out of like a stolen cabinet sort of thing. But let's do a slightly different scenario. Let us say in this scenario, I draw these 2 cards. We have 5 and an 8. Now, that 8 is particularly important because you may notice it is a club. It is yellow, matching the loony stat. So in this instance, I would add an additional 1 because the club and the colour, or club or colour I guess, is matching up that particular stat. So 5 plus 8 is 11, plus 2 makes it 13, plus 1 is 14. So even with all those modifiers, we would have failed then. So it's just a little bit under, so nothing too bad would happen. But let us say that we did really badly, and it was actually a monumental failure just to go completely on the opposite end of the scale, which is 15 plus points below. The toon fell so abysmally that their photo appears next to the definition of the word failure. The toon becomes tooned out and draws 1 fewer card on the next showdown or challenge. Additionally, a new negative element appears in the scene, i.e. a new opponent, a different obstacle, a noisy passerby, at the animator's discretion. So what would have happened in either of those examples if I'd drawn a Joker? Well, Jokers are treated as 10s, and you treat them as your preferred face. So in my example, where we're looking for the loony stat, i.e. a clubs, we would treat the Joker as a 10 of clubs. And that's it. That is Helluva Town in a nutshell. So, and character creation is even simpler. You just draw a few cards and just make note of the numbers that appear. It's that simple. The more interesting conversation to be had, however, is about running it, because it's rather fine and dandy to present on a page, hey, embrace whatever the fucking players throw at you, but it doesn't actually give you a lot of help how to embrace that cartoon element, or do something that marries up the cartoon element and the more mature subject matter that's found within Helluva Town a lot more, and that is where I feel that this video is going to be helping out a lot more. Helluva Town is a TTRPG of 2 very distinct flavours, which is something I keep mentioning, but it's really important to hammer this point in, because it's actually something that the TTRPG itself doesn't really do, because it focuses a lot on the cartoon element of things, like making sure the players have lots of fun, for the animator or games master to embrace the chaos that it brings, etc. and so forth, but there isn't a lot of conversation regarding the more mature elements of Helluva Town. How the fact that you are playing in a very specific point in American history. It's 1930s America. Yes, it's got a cartoon backdrop, and Helluva Town exists in this weird nebulous space between Little Italy and Bowery, I believe it is. But quite a lot was happening in those 2 towns specifically, and the fact that you're playing gangsters, there's a mafia influence in there, there's alcohol, there's gambling, there's prostitution, there's sexism, there's racism, which isn't me saying that you should go and be a fucking arsehole at your table if it's something that's going to make people uncomfortable. Obviously play up or play down certain elements to fit your specific vibe, but those elements are there, and you can't really properly embrace the Helluva Town spirit, I feel, if you don't lean into some of those more harder hitting conversational pieces, things that are usually yellow or red lined on your typical consent sheets. I mean, you could argue there could be racism across the different types of species or animals or whatever you want to call them in Helluva Town. For example, one of the large gangs in Helluva Town is made up of ducks, or rather their bosses are made up with ducks, so maybe through reputation it's given ducks a bad name, and there's some poor assumptions that could be made about the gambling nature of ducks, for example. Which sort of serves it as a bit of a hurdle getting into the TTRPG, because it might seem a bit all fun and dandy playing gangster cartoon characters, but when you actually sit down and think about what that actually is, that is quite the significant hurdle to get involved with, as is for the players to enter a TTRPG that doesn't really have a lot of framework, because something like Dungeons & Dragons or Call of Cthulhu, which coincidentally shares a very similar setting to Helluva Town, or Vampire the Masquerade, or basically any other TTRPG. There's usually a strict setting, systems, rules, meta plots that can guide the players to be whatever they want to be within those confines. Helluva Town being a TTRPG where you play cartoon characters, those constraints and confines aren't there. You can be whatever you want to be. You're actually told to be whatever you want to be. And not in the standard TTRPG sense, but literally whatever your brain can come up with, which can be very difficult for people to do, especially as most people who play TTRPGs are adults, and they have let go of their inner kid some time ago, and they're just running on the fading fumes of their nostalgia. I can remember one particular interesting incident on the Achian Games' Discord server, where there was somebody that was asking about the physics of a hammer dropping or something like that, because they wanted to know how something would work, and one of the writers was just saying, well, it's a TTRPG about cartoon characters that's not really important. That's like the dynamics of something falling and gravity and all the rest of it doesn't really matter as much. And this player, or games master, or whoever it was just finding it really difficult to wrap their brain around that, because what do you do with something where you just have to go by the concept of rulings rather than rules? Because if you follow by the rules, it's in the book, it tells you what to do, etc. and so forth. But rulings is the concept of flying on the seat of your pants, just making up decisions as and when appropriate, or inappropriate mayhap if you're talking about the sort of tongue-in-cheek nature of Helluva Town. So it's inherently quite a difficult TTRPG to get into. For something that is so small, there are quite a few hurdles that one has to consider before actually playing. So with all those ideas thrown in your face, what can I offer that's a bit different from the very generous 1.5 pages found within the core book that tells you how to be an animator or games master? Well, admittedly, not a lot, because with something that is free form as playing cartoon characters, there's not really much guidance to go on, other than I should really emphasise the point that the Games Master really do have to let go of their babies, i.e. the campaign and whatever characters they're going to design, because the moment you give it to the players to run, it is no longer yours. If you want to have complete control over everything, just write a fucking book, or a web series, or whatever fucking medium you want it to be. Because your players are going to completely trash it and tear it inside out, fist it and all the rest of it. And when you add in the element of being fucking cartoon characters in there, things are just going to get even more chaotic, and you're just going to have to embrace the fact that you are not going to know what to do all the time, and just make up ideas on the fly and just see what makes sense or what doesn't make sense, because it doesn't have to make sense because it's a cartoon world. But the main idea that I'm going to insert here, which I've already talked about, is that I feel that you should lean into as much as the more adult themes and conversations found within like the 1930s backdrop here. Like, one of the sources of inspiration for this game is Cuphead. What's the premise of Cuphead? You've got two cartoon characters that have lost a bet, and now they've got to go and collect money from people, which is basically them beating the shit out of a load of people, and then coming back and selling their soul to the devil. And there's that really horrifying, like, alternate ending where you say, okay, we give up, we just go with the bad ending option, which is sort of like playing on screen somewhere now. There's some very interesting horror aesthetics that you could lean in here, and with the actual art book itself, as cool as the artwork is, like, we have a skeleton with an accordion that's turning what looks like children into skeletons, melting their fucking faces off. That is horrifying. Really fucking creepy ass shit. And whilst the element of being cartoon characters may dumb down some of the horrors a bit, in many ways it can cause you to amp things up a lot more, because you can play into things and make things truly fucking ridiculous. Whereas, again, a scenario like that in any other horror game would be horrifying in of itself, and I don't think a lot of people would want to play with you again. But making it as cartoon kiddies, you might be able to get away with it a little more, because really, they're not dead. They're just skelly boys and girls and non-binary pals, you know? But then again, you might not want to do that, because you may think that all children are sacred and want to be protected, to which you might not want to be in a game of mine, because, as I've talked about in a video before, I do think that kids in horror media should be killed off if it's warranted, rather than just being a cringy edgelord. And as much of an edgelord I like to define myself as, and as much as I like a bit of cringe here and there, I don't do things for just the sake of doing them. There is often a narrative purpose to serve here, and that's kind of where you need to go with some of these more mature conversations, that if you are going to have elements of sexism and alcohol and gambling, all the other stuff I've talked about before in this video, do it tastefully. Don't do it just to be fucking weird, because people will know it's just you being weird, rather than you're trying to get a certain narrative or message across, because these things are important to the Helluva Town setting, and even if they're in the background, even you just see like a bit of it, you're just wandering by, or you hear noises, it is there, and the player should be reminded that it's there. And of course, being cartoon characters, as I mentioned already, play up those things a lot more. It's not just moans you hear behind a locked door. You hear full-on orgy pounding against the door. The door is like wobbling in and out. It's like so much is going on in and out. You could play fucking goofy noises to fucking represent this. I actually meant goofy as in silly, but now I'm just thinking of fucking goofy, like bush, whee, like all that sort of stupid shit. That could be really effective, and it could ruin a handful of childhoods as well. So again, used tastefully, but when I'm going to be running Helluva Town, I am going to be leaning a lot more into those more mature themes because it's part of the setting, and it would sort of do Helluva Town a disservice if they're not present there, because if they weren't there, I might as well just be playing Toon. As I think I've made pretty clear by now, your players are going to completely destroy any and everything that you put at them just through the nature of players being players, coming up with ideas and solutions that you wouldn't have thought about, and that's not even factoring in the fact that you're going to be having cartoon characters that the laws of physics don't apply to, that are going to perform surgical goatsies on any and everything that may or may not even have a pulse, because any and everything is now a living organism that has thoughts, feelings, and etc. and so forth. So the world and universe is truly your throbbing oyster at this point. There's a lot to handle here. So if you're the sort of games master that's going to be playing lots of notes and backstory and like lore for each square inch of a city, this is not going to work for you. Helluva Town is very quick, responsive, short-paced, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be running long-term campaigns with this, which some may argue is a flaw of the TTRPG, and I would be very intrigued to see if anybody was going to make like an emotional, like Critical Role styled extravaganza of a story, you know. But Helluva Town is more or less a TTRPG where you're meant to be having short adventures where players can come in and out like any old fucking cartoon episode that you'd watch on TV. Now, I don't typically do what I'm about to suggest, but I really do recommend that Games Masters have a look at the actual adventures at the back of the book. Now, I'm sure anybody who's going to be reading the book is going to be reading them anyway, but in the past when I've done these videos, I've often ignored those sections of the book because there's so many themes and ideas presented in a TTRPG that I just want to start creating my own world and ideas from the get-go, and I'll be inspired by the material just to present something new and unique. And also, I typically don't run adventures, but with something that is so free-form as Helluva Town that really doesn't give the Games Master a lot to work with in the such, it would be recommended to go and look at the adventures at the back of the book so you can have some sense of structure, or at least have an idea how to go about planning your TTRPG sessions using Helluva Town, and it also gives you a bit more of an idea about the sort of tone of how the characters should speak if you want it to be a more cartoon focused and not something that's a bit more grounded and gritty like I'm probably going to be doing with a pinch of the cartoon tongue-in-cheek sort of thing, which is ultimately why I got invested in Helluva Town about a year or so ago. But as a general recap, the different adventures, campaign, one-shots, you won't even want to fucking call them, are divided into 2 to 4 scenes, and I think doing things in groups of 4 scenes is actually the best way to do it, or 3 to 4 scenes, because it allows you to easily structure things in a hour per scene, as most TTRPG sessions typically last 3 to 4 hours, so that gives you an hour per scene, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider all the roleplay that's going to be happening, all the combat that may well be happening, and that one easy problem that you're going to give your players, but they're going to spend half a fucking year going through all the loops and hurdles and tying knots in themselves, rather than addressing the matter at hand, those hours are going to burn up pretty quickly, so don't underestimate how quickly those hours will just burn by. And the rest of the information that's provided in said one-shots campaigns, because really each of the different adventures of the campaign in the core book could be treated as individual one-shots because they feel fairly detached from each other for the most part. It's all done in really small shorthand, like a paragraph here, key themes are in bold, and that's about it. So it's just really geared towards the Games Master to find the information they're looking for really quickly. They see the appropriate stat, if a stat is at all even needed, and you're just away just keeping the plot moving as quickly as possible. And that's kind of the important thing here, just to make sure that things that don't stagnate and you're not tripping over like what the rules and what would make sense. Again, cartoon character logic, and it follows with the concept of rulings over rules. So what are we actually going to be doing for this actual adventure? Well, as I mentioned already, we're going to be using the adventure hook that I wrote that ended up being in the art book, which again is such a weird fucking thing for me to say, but who knows, there may be time in the future where it just seems like normality for me. But I digress. Let's actually read through the adventure so we know what we're working with here, so we can have a better idea of how to use this as a leaping off point to write our own adventure. later. Now, you may be a bit curious at this point. Law, you wrote this adventure and yet you don't actually know what to do with it. What gives? Well, there's two reasons for that. The first of which is that I haven't actually looked at my adventure properly in some time. Well, I mean, I read it fairly recently for the purposes of my unboxing video and just, like, got really excited and enjoyed about that. But beyond that, I didn't give it much thought because this was part of a competition where a 500 or 550 word prompt, I can't remember which one of the two it was presented to the company, as were a load of others, of course. This wasn't just unique to me, of course. It wouldn't be a competition, it was just with one person now, wouldn't it? Where an adventure hook could be developed into a full-fledged adventure. So I wrote it with the intention that it could be expanded into something more if it won. Now it didn't, so it means I can be a bit more freeform with it and come up with something that's really cool and unique, or something that I think is really cool and unique. You, of course, can do whatever the fuck you want it, and I don't want you to discourage from you doing something completely different with the idea, but this is what I want to do with the adventure here, or at least that's the direction I'm going to be going with here, so hopefully we'll have lots of fun with that. Now, The Purr of the Vampire, which is the name of the adventure, which I know is a huge shocker for somebody whose content surrounds vampires more or less more than anything else, would have something that's relating to a vampire, is set in the Posh Plaza. So we're going to read through the adventure first, and then we're going to remind ourselves exactly what the Posh Plaza is like to help us guide the general tone and setting of the adventure better, so it makes a lot more sense. Now, of course, I could just put the adventure anywhere else. I could put it in where all the brothels are happening, for example. I could put it in a factory, but no. We're going to be doing this in the Posh Plaza just so it makes sense, because that's where the authors think it should belong, and I want to see their logic behind that and make it work. And if I really don't like it, I might put it in something else all the same. But for the moment, it's going to be in the Posh Plaza. So, The Purr of the Vampire focuses on the ancient Nosferatu. The Sphinx cat-looking vampire has woken from their 100-year slumber, and now craves an extraordinary banquet in the form of three fine, wealthy ladies. The players receive a missing persons case to rescue the three with $1,000 reward each. This, of course, is a ruse from Nosferatu to energize the toon's muscles and get the blood flowing with these strange obstacle courses and devilish puzzles. The adventure concludes with an encounter with the vampire themselves, determining the fate of the three lucky or unlucky ladies. And I think the missing persons case could be like a... Well, we've already established it's going to be a ruse, but rather than receiving like a random-ass letter that's going to be very suspicious, the players are going to be called by somebody else to go and rescue them, thinking, oh, we're going to be rescuing these ladies for somebody else, when actually Nosferatu set the whole thing up all along. And I think it'll be a little fun, entertaining idea to have a pimp summon the players. Why? Because fuck it. Why not? It's the first thing that came to mind, so that's what we're going to be working with here. And apologies for the weird fucking lighting that's been going on here. So, let us move away from the art book now and turn to the head of a core book and see what the Posh Plaza entails for us. The Posh Plaza used to be the ambitious utopian future of Helluva Town until it all went down. An avant-garde design of an entire neighbourhood, top-tier technology, amenities and luxuries, rich in chromed flippers and gathering spaces, hanging gardens and chocolate fountains, bribes coming down the city hall like hail, scam lofts. Big Dice was in charge at the time, had whipped together an army of desperate toons. The old natural reserve of Dutch gnomes sprouted over, and the bucks of toons with dreams were all abuzz. Halfway through completion, Posh Plaza was left to itself. Way through completion, Posh Plaza was left to itself. Big Dice disappeared, along with a tank full of bucks. In time, the half-ruined townhouse was filled with malicious, wielding skeleton zombies of soured cream, munch chips and old hairdryers with clouded eyes. The degradation, erosion, ruin ate up stories and skyscrapers, and more sinister toons lurked around the eternal night and engulfed Posh Plaza. Its irregular, unfinished streets echoed with terrifying calls and forgotten chants. No toon ever truly dies, but the local bogies still took the opportunity to build Howe Hill, the first cemetery in town. Something about Feng Shui, they said. Posh Plaza has since been plagued with feuding rivals and the occasional undead horde. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense why the Posh Plaza is the location for this. And I have a look at some of the other bullet points here, but this seems like to be a rundown shithole that isn't doing too well at the moment. This is probably where the worst of the game is happening within Helluva Town. So before we actually design the adventure, I think it's a good idea to work out what each of these 5 characters rather should be. What's the pimp, what the 3 ladies, and Nosferatu's NPT tricks, that is non-player toon. Now, The pimp, I have the idea that I think it would be really interesting if the pimp was a mouse or a rat or something. Why? Because cats typically like have dominion over mice, they hunt them down, so maybe Nosferatu is using some sort of vampire powers to control the mouse, and I think having like a mouse pimp would just be quite funny because they're usually seen as quite small, and actually having it as a tiny fucking mouse, these huge fucking ladies, like the juxtaposition between the two might be really fucking funny indeed. And that also gives me an opportunity to present a really small character with a real fucking deep voice like that. Oi, bitch, where's me money? You know, just shit like that. I find it amusing, and I'm hoping that my players would find that amusing as well. As for our three ladies, I had an idea for two of them, I seem to recall. It's been over a year now since I've written this, so I don't exactly remember all the details, other than I gave the characters a alliterative name, so their names started with the same letter. So with a superhero example, Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, etc. and so forth. But for going back to Helluva Town, I'm surprised that this cartoon-themed influence didn't make its way into Helluva Town, or at least it wasn't mentioned, but Conker's Bad Fur Day has a very good tone for something like this, I feel, albeit with slightly less edge. You might have to sand that off a little bit. But one character I was really keen on having was a flower character with massive knockers, like hot model face with just really skinny body and massive knockers. It's sort of a caricature of what's seen as really attractive, at least what would be further down the line, or the modern day, or like the early noughties or whatever, and for the players to interact with, and something that a pimp would find really attractive, I feel, and certain clientele would find attractive too. Now, as for the cow in question, I don't want to go with a sunflower, so I will just go with a rose, because I quite like roses. They're my favourite flower, and if it turns out that players choose a rose as well, then I will just revert back to sunflower or daisy, because I really like daisies, as simple as that is. Now, the other lady I had come up with was sort of like a cake sort of cat that was filled with a lot of cream. You could probably see why my juvenile brain went there. Now, as for the third one, as we're going for like different presentations of stereotypical hotness presentation, I guess, which is a really fucking cack-handed way of presenting that, i.e. beauty standards, I had this idea of presenting like this very human-looking character with actually a robot. So again, very model presenting, but you chip away the skin a little bit, it turns out that they're a robot, and there might be something in the game where if the woman is harmed at anywhere at all, she then becomes a big killer sex robot thing, which should be a lot of fun, presuming that sort of thing happens. But what about Nosferatu himself? Well, if we have a look at the NPT portion of the core book, a bit of that's going to appear on screen, you can see we have got a variety of ranks, bonks, tricks, and difficulty. Now, to me at least, this character is a boss. They're not controlling other henchmen, although that may come up at a later point in the actual adventure, where he's going to be fighting off like some skeletons or some goons or something like that. That might actually be a nice idea just to provide a bit of variety in there. So this character is a boss as sorts, right? So that means they're going to have up to 10 bonks, which is their HP. They're going to have up to 25 difficulty for players drawing their cards. But we're going to be focusing more on the tricks, which is 3 to 4. I'm going to try and aim for 4. If I only stay with 3, that's going to be absolutely fine. There's 18 NPTs tricks here. Each of them are dedicated to like a different area of Helluva Town. I don't know what's going to be more appropriate here, because the character doesn't really fit into the mold of any of them. It's a vampire that's fallen asleep and now awoken from torpor, if we use a Vampire the Masquerade term here a little bit. If we start counting from the list from 2, we get to 19, which means we can roll a d20, ignoring 20, and come up with some tricks that he's going to be using there. And if that didn't come up on the camera all too well, sort of like bright blue and pink colouring schemes, we've got like a bisexual theme and transgender theme going on here, because trans rights are human rights, and I think that's all very fucking cool shit. So let's just roll on this little chart I've just created and see what sort of tricks Nosferatu may have. We got a 7, so drained. All toons lose 1 point from each of their stats from the showdown turn to a minimum value of 0. I actually think that works really well, and coincidentally this actually is one from the Posh Plaza, because a vampire character would have drained, and I'm going to be writing things on a very small bit of paper just to keep things very minimal and to stop me from over planning. Drained. Rolling the d20 again. 14. Punching Balloon. All toons must pass a touchy test with difficulty 15 or take a bonk, preferred by the NPTs of Infinite Jest. Punching Balloon. What would that look like? Because drained is obviously like the vampire feeding upon them sort of thing, or like some sort of magic spell where it's like coming towards them, like sucking the blood or nutrients out of them that way. Well, their energy as it's affecting their stats rather than their actual HP. But punching balloon. Well, it's obviously going to be situational depending on what's going on, but the thing that I envision at the moment is like this big swirl of the cape sort of thing, like all fucking vampire style. Let's roll for a third time, potentially the last time. 20, so we're going to re-roll that one again. 1. Abyssal Unluck. All wet tunes reveal a card and lose a number of bucks equal to its value. Now that's an interesting one because I hadn't considered water being a feature here. Do I want to put water in the boss room though? What sort of thing? What would that add to the fight though? Nothing, I think. So it's not like any like negative modifiers like wading through the water because this is going to be like the last and final room. Unless it's a room full of blood and dead bodies and other women that he's stolen. I'll go with that. Make it real fucking OTT. Right, so we'll do one more roll, and if this one doesn't inspire me, I'll just stick it with 3. 20 again, I'm going to roll that again. 7 again, we're going to roll again. 5. I've just realised I miscounted EMP Blast should have been 7. All tunes must pass a Looney test with a difficulty 15. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, we'll stick with Drained. Anyway, 5 is Desert Quiet or Desert Quiet. All tunes must pass the Feely test of difficulty 15 or skip the next showdown turn. You see, I like that, but Feely implies there's being touched, speaking. Well, I suppose Desert Quiet could fit into different methods of the vampire, even using hypnotic powers or like a cat screeching, just like causing them to freeze up. So I'm going to go with that. So yeah, we've got 4 tricks here. So with that out of the way, we've designed our NPCs, we've got the still stats to be working with as well. We now need to be designing our adventure, and the thing that I'm going to be using with that is a book that I've talked about in high regard across the channel, is the Mythic GM Emulator 2nd edition by Tanner Pigeon, just to give me some prompts to work out the sort of puzzles that we're going to be finding in this 3-story building, which I've only just decided now, rather than what I initially intended was like 3 rooms in a house. So we're going to use a 3-story building, working our way up. Actually, perhaps we're going to be working our way down into like the ancient crypt of Nosferatu, or just giving them some rooms to explore. I don't know, but whatever we're going to be deciding on, there's going to be 3 rooms in this house where these ladies are going to be captured and they're going to have to be rescued some way. How? And the way that we're going to be deciding this is by using some tables in Mythic and rolling some 2-word prompts, and then by using our imagination, we'll be able to come up with something that's totally based and poggers. At least I think it will be anyway. And so this is going to be a series of D100 rolls, and again a similar sort of dice set, sort of the pink and blue metallic ones, and see what we can come up with. Just move the last of the books over there. That causes everything to fall down behind me. That's hell of a shit. So let us put that there and roll to see what we're going to be getting up for the first room where our Rose Lady is going to be in. And I should give them names as well, but I'll decide that later on. We've got 66, which gives us the word of oppose. 74, oppose possessions. Okay, so oppose possessions. So there's a conflict of interest in here. There may be that this room is filled with jewels and diamonds and sorts of things, and the players have got to like pass a very simple test to not be pulled in by all these jewels and treasures sort of thing. If they don't, the plucking plant dies or something like that. Or get like pulled through and then Nosferatu like sucks her blood, that sort of thing. That's just like a really fucking simple thing. Like wading through, finding all like these jewels and whatnot. But why would the rose be here? I suppose there'd be like other flowers here as means of a distraction. I don't know. I mean, we don't have to decide all the nitty-gritty stuff of that now. We're just using this as a leaping off point. Because remember, we're trying not to overplan this sort of stuff, which I don't typically do anyway. But that's enough to work with. Room 1 is like a treasure room. Or study or something. Players will have to, like, wade through the different gold or whatnot. And maybe they're given, like, 3 chances. Like, the first chance, like, some of the jewels or things comes to life, or they're like trapped in a room or something. Second time, more enemies and whatnot. The third time, the rose is like set on fire or whatever. I don't know, that's something that we can work with for sure. Just have a lot of fun with and see what the players come up with and just bounce off their fucking chaos. So again, 2-word prompt, we've come up with a problem and a debatable solution. So let us roll on the action tables once more. We got 3, which is Activate, which from the whole robot vibe thing, I think this is going to be their room. It might not be, of course. And 21, which is Activate Disadvantage. Okay. The idea that comes to mind here is that there are 3 or maybe 4 of these really gorgeous looking women who look all similar to the description that they've been given, which is probably going to be very vague because, you know, it's a fucking pimp. They're not going to be able to point out, like, the exact details of a humanoid woman. And the players are going to have to work out which one is the right one. And again, they're going to have, like, 3 or 4 chances to find the right one. The wrong ones are going to attack everyone. And then the right one is going to, you know, be taken away to be sucked off that way around. So I think that's a really simple thing to do. That could introduce a bit of combat there. But I think having something else there would be useful to have as well. Probably they'll have to get to them rather than just opening a door and just like finding like these girls like just stand up and like against the wall asleep sort of thing. But maybe some bats, maybe something that's vampire related, maybe something that's cat related, I don't know, like some sort. We don't have to work that shit out straight away, but we've got like the general puzzle here. Now for room 3, it's going to have the cake stuff in there, so there's going to be whole sort of bakery themes in here, mayhap. Who fucking knows? But let's roll. We got 89, which is going to give us a result of Suppress. And that is 36. Suppress Goal. Perhaps this one offers a moral dilemma. That in actual fact that you could save the target that you're after, but there's somebody else here. And you're going to have to choose. You can only save one sort of thing. But then again, this is cartoon logic. So how well is that going to be in practicality? I am not sure, but I like the dilemma here. So you've got the cake lady, and it's quite literally like a big old fucking metal press thing, and they squish it down, all the cream comes out, they get a good pounding. And then the other hand, you've got like a load of kids. I did say I was going to have fucking kids in here somehow, and you shouldn't play any game where we're going to be killing kids. But I think that's an interesting dilemma. Do they save their target? Or do they try and save the kids? Or do they get really adventurous and try to save both? You know, this being like a very simple card-based system, like not able to push rolls or anything. If they fail, they fail. And that's one of the dangers of Helluva Town, really. You can't really push things as much. But yeah, we've got some nice options there. We've got the treasure room, we've got the choose a robot, and we've got the moral dilemma, which provides some very interesting vampire shenanigans. And then, of course, we've got the Nosferatu fight itself. I'll just put boss room there because fuck it, why not? That's going to be filled with blood, which is where we're going to be using the Abyssal Unlock trick once per showdown, I believe is how it works. There's probably going to be some other elements of the fight as well. I mean, if they're going to have like 20 so health that once it gets to a certain point, there's going to be like different stages in the fight. I like that, different stages. But you see, it really doesn't take that long to come up with an idea, especially something that is so as basic as this in designing puzzles when you're using something like Mythic to generate ideas on the fly. I've actually done a much larger video about generating a whole one-shot using Mythic with a different game, that one being focused around zombies. But that's all there is to it, folks. Pun not intended. So the session is done, and as you can see, we've got the remnants of last night's session, we've got the animator screen, we've got the core book, and of course, I was going to show off the art book at the end of the session, just to tell people, hey, the adventure you wrote, I actually wrote it for the actual RPG, so it's technically canon. Yeah, I know it's only 500 words, but it was just really nice to have that bit of validation, appreciation for all the wonderful things that I do. Like, joking aside, half-heartedly, I guess, because I'm being serious, because it's really cool that some writing of mine ended up being in a TTRPG, and I'm really proud of what I've done with it, just coming up with a few notes and a bit of paper here, using Mythic as well, the books over there, because I used that once or twice just to generate some results, because I got asked questions that caught me off guard, and I thought, oh, let me just roll some dice here for just a moment, try and work something out. Yeah, I'm just really happy with how well it went and how everybody had a hell of a good time. You see what I did there? So what actually happened? Well, I'm going to have to censor a little bit of what I'm doing, purely because it's sort of borderline ELP in a really, like, crude teenage toilet humour sort of way, which everybody was fine with, all having a bit of a laugh with it. Everybody was really enjoying, like, embracing that cartoon character fun, also leaning into the more serious nature of the gangster vibes, which was great. absolutely fantastic, but I can't go into too much detail about the specifics. I will mention bits here and there, particularly with the stuff that happened at the beginning of the session, but YouTube will probably take down the channel otherwise. And as I said, it wasn't like full-on fucking jerk circle time in the session. It was just a bit of tongue-in-cheek humour, you know, and we all had a bit of a fun time with it, and that's what it's all about, really. So what actually happened? Well, I'm going to be looking down quite a bit because I've got a page of notes here. I'm going to move that note out of the way here. I've got a copy of the character sheets here as well, because we all made the characters in the session, which didn't take too long as well, and everybody used a slightly different method of making their characters. I say slightly because you only get offered like 1 or 2 ways in the book. You have like a list of 12 to choose from, and then have the stats of what it tells you to do. Or you can like draw some cards like the 2 twos, the ace, and the joker, which comes up as a 0. Or you can do what one person did and realise, oh, there's 12 here, I'm going to roll a d12 and work out which one my character's going to be. Well, that's really cool. I hadn't thought about doing it like that. So I'll mention that when we get to it. But who are our cast? Well, we have the Queen of Clubs. Not the playing card. Not like a club you beat people over the head. I'm talking about an actual club, like a building with music in it. They were role-playing an entire building, 1-story building with these massive eyes. It was a literal gay club. That's the level that we're going into this with, folks, and I just really fucking loved the bit of wordplay there. We have Getaway Mercedes, who was like this really thirsty car for petrol, diesel, and anything else that went in their gob. You can probably see with the sexual stuff I mentioned. Anyway, as I said, they were a sinning getaway car, and they were the one that decided which of the block stats they're going to use with a D12. We have Dilly Dally Dildo. Need I say any more? And I actually put that in my notes here. Well, I suppose I do, because you need to have a good idea of what they looked like. They were a 6.9-inch purple fluorescent rubbery dildos. They're kind of a Saints Row the Third vibe here. And of course, 6.9, haha, nice sort of thing. And everybody thought it was really weird that I knew that dildos did not exist like that in the 30s. You would have had like this big like fucking back massager vibrator things, or like a fucking rock or bit of metal to shove up your holes. And everyone just looked at me like I was the fucking weirdo, like I was the one that confidently went, I'm going to play a floppy dildo. Oh well, it just goes to show that having all this knowledge is a curse sometimes. Hello. Future lore here. One thing about Dilly Dally Dildo's character I'd completely forgotten about, for better and unfortunately for worse, is that they decided that their character was going to come from Eldridge Bottom, which was one of like the stretch goal places in Helluva Town that they're going to add if like a certain level of money was going to be hit. And as the name would imply, this is sort of like a Lovecraftian inspired, which is like fucking SpongeBob SquarePants on fucking crack or whatever. Which kind of added like a really gross layer to the dildo, like it was all slimy and wet and it just stunk of fish all the time. Which, given some of the things that's going to happen to the character, makes it really worrying that people actually want to have fun with the character. And finally, the one player who actually went into this thinking, oh, I'm going to be a gangster, so I'm going to be Tommy Gun Cat. So putting a really interesting spin on Top Cat, who was like a gun-dealing, sinning tabby cat. And then they realised when everybody was doing these really stupid ideas, they thought they were doing it wrong. Said, no, you're not doing it wrong at all. If that's the person you want to play, I mean, you could spice things up and make them like really angry, aggressive, or make them really fucking small, and then they get these really big weapons out, like bonk people over the head sort of thing. Like, play it however you want to. There's no right or wrong way of doing things. Like, it's all in the feeling and the vibe of the cartoon stuff, rather than appearing as silly as possible. But when I explained that all to them, they were feeling a bit better about it, although I feel at that point they were being a bit reserved because they thought they were doing something wrong. You know, because, you know, slapstick cartoon stuff, they actually went into this being rather serious with their character, which is great. I love the backstory stuff, but they just continued to add to that, assured that they weren't doing anything wrong. That they also checked with me with the concept because it was actually potentially triggering to some of my upbringing stuff, that maybe the reason why they were gangster and they're being pulled into this is because being a senior they weren't getting the gears or being kicked out or whatever, and it was just easier just to do crime, which is unfortunately a rather serious part of life that a lot of people actually live through. And they're just, when they're not doing crime, they're just like drinking their life the way, and they wanted to see if that was going to be okay with me because they know a bit about my upbringing, and because I had some actual proper warning about this, rather than what happened in a game of The Walking Dead that I did. It's sort of alluded to up there. I was okay with that, and I knew it wasn't going to be like a huge focus on the game, so I think we could have just like skimmed past that, and I think they were more or less going to be playing a really depressed and or angry character. And they did lean into the more angry side of things in a really stupid, cartoonish way, so they got into it rather nicely, which is great because it meant they were having fun and they didn't feel they're having their time wasted. And also, unlike a lot of people playing TTRPGs, they're rather smitten with the idea of using playing cards, because I know that some people get really fucking snobbish when you tell them a TTRPG uses cards. I know I'm kind of guilty of that, but it's rather a weird blending of the tool set and some very specific circumstances, like the Alien RPG, for example. I think it'd have been used better with a D10 rather than the cards, but that is a conversation for a different time. But before I actually talk about the game that I ran and how everybody did, I did actually want to include that we were running this game via Discord, and I did one of the few things in sessions when I'm running them that I don't typically do, and I actually made everybody listen to some music. Well, I didn't make everybody. I highly recommended it because it was imperative to the setting and the tone I was going for, and quite frankly, what we were listening to I think just worked really fucking well. It was like a whiskey jazz playlist thing by the musician Dr. Saxlove. Real fucking cheesy name. I've listened to his stuff for years. He does these jazz covers and disco funk. Basically, if it's like black music, he's done it with a saxophone cover. He's really great stuff. I would actually put it beneath this section of the video whilst I'm talking, so you can listen to it as I'm talking, but he doesn't want other people using his music for his stuff, which is absolutely fine, but it really did help to set the mood for what we were doing, and I feel it just sort of like heightened everybody's enjoyment because of that as well. I'm also going to mention that Helluva Town does have a soundtrack, or at least a small snippet of one. It's got 3 tracks at the moment. They may add more to it, because I think there was like 4 or 5 that were like reach as crowdfunding goals, although I'm a bit fucking hazy about that. You can go and check it up in your free time, but quite frankly I think they're a bit shit, and I'm a bit disappointed about how knock-off Looney Tunes it sound, and knock-off Cuphead how it sounds, which is unfortunate really, because I kind of expected a bit more. Like, I wasn't expecting like full-on fucking jazz orchestra band sort of thing. No, I mean, again, small company and all that, and all the money that was raised for the TTRPG would have had to be paid for the fucking musicians, and then some. So I knew it was going to be like sample-based, but it just sounded a bit lifeless. So personally, I'm not going to use that soundtrack. I'll be using the rest of my expansive jazz collection instead. So when everybody made their characters all ready to go with a whiz-bang slapstick humour, I went over the rules again just to make sure that everybody remembered, and I expected people to forget something here and there, or needed a little reminder here and there with stuff to do with their rap sheet and certain bonuses and modifiers, to etc. and so forth. We were ready to begin, and people thought I was just going to launch straight into the funny, but they kind of forgot that they'd been in games with me before, and I make things particularly bleak. I am, of course, a horror enthusiast. I have talked about to you lot already how I was going to be approaching this, and this is the introduction that I presented to them, and I'm going to deliver it in a similar sort of style as I did for my players. Posh Plaza, the home of what might have been, the home of all that's come to ruin. Crime, screaming, smashed glass, screaming cats, and crime wherever it can be. Mouse will be fed, but not much more than that. Hopefully no one goes home tonight with empty wallets and empty stomachs. Almost sounds like a jazz number itself, doesn't it? Rain pounds the ground violently as bodies, machining, and whatever else you can care to imagine this moody night hurry into the glory hole. Describe yourselves. And they were a bit surprised, because I said they had one idea, I gave them something else, and it was like, way to ruin the fucking mood, lore. Like, they were so taken back by the dirt, the grime, and the standards of it all, that they completely missed the fact that I called this club the Glory Hole. And if you don't know what that is, oh my sweet summer child, you should really get off this fucking channel. So they do that, they describe themselves again, what they're doing, and the only bits of conversations happening, then they're let in, except for Queen, the Queen of Clubs, that is, because of this big-ass building, a literal fucking building. We had the first roll. I'm going to go with roll just because that's the language we're used to, rather than draw. And it was a loony roll because obviously they needed to shrink themselves down to enter the club because they physically could not fucking go in. And I said the difficulty value was madness, and I'm looking there because coincidentally the game stream's there, and I just got that to refer to because I didn't write down all the bits and pieces in my notes here. So the madness difficulty value is they needed to meet or beat the number of 25, so chances are they're just going to have to be sitting outside and like keeping an arm fiend or like pressing their ear, and I imagine like a big old fucking ear forming out of the building to do that. So the Queen of Clubs actually drew really well, but they were just 4 shy of what they needed, and I didn't think it was that fair to not let them at least get in a little bit. Or like struggle getting in with that, because they drew a really good fucking hand. It was just a bit shy, so they gave them like a succeed with a cost sort of scenario, and it's like, yeah, you can get in, but you're going to cause some damage getting in, and they didn't think about the repercussions of that. So when it came to the point of being offered the reward money, they had some of that money taken away to pay for the damages of them entering in. Now Mercedes also had a similar draw difficulty value to that, but because there was now a big old fucking hole in the wall, I had to drop the difficulty value a little bit to 15, and they decided they were going to employ one of their tricks, well, their only trick, live fast, die in shame, which I believe is the one that allows you to draw an additional card, and then the next time you have to draw a card, you draw one less. I'm not particularly clear with my notes here, but it was a real fun moment when they did that, because they have to like associate a catchphrase to that, and they just went, beep beep motherfucker. So they managed to get in about 6 higher than they needed, so it was a great success. So I just said they sort of like did it with style, like barely touching the side, like they did a little drift that they wanted to. Everybody was like around, so just made a real big fucking show of it. That's when we get to Dildo, who entered the room. And this is one of the moments where I used Mythic, because they were like looking for really hot, beautiful women to be well acquainted to, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I thought it would be funny, the potentiality of them not finding any hot women to be well acquainted with. So I used Mythic to decide that. I did a 50-50, because it's like people everywhere. Knowing my bit about Dino the Rat, there's probably going to be a bit more women here, so I then bumped that up to likely. And it turned out it was a big fucking no. They couldn't immediately see, but there were some really hot guys. They were going to go and become well acquainted to the guys, because this individual was bisexual, and they didn't fucking care about that, and so was the dildo. They'd just get themselves warmed up until something better comes along, which I can totally respect as a bisexual myself. So they did their role, and they also employed a trick, which was the explosive idea, and I'm going to amend myself here, because actually this is the one where you draw an additional card, whereas the previous one, I think you redraw your hand, and like, I don't quite remember, my notes aren't exactly clear, but it was really funny when their catchphrase was, bottoms up, quite literally. And it was funny with that one because they took a bonk, which is like the health points of Helluva Town, of course. So we sort of described the fact of not being quite lubricated properly. So it was a bit rough getting up there, as it were, or whatever hole the choice was, or all the holes, or whatever. But because they got a great success, they then recovered that. So, you know, real fucking warming up. They found some lubricant elsewhere. I don't know. It was just a bit of all silly fun as all of that was going on. Some nice dildo 1930s cartoon like deep throating action. Just what you want with your Law and Savior. Meanwhile, we had Tommy Guncat, who wanted to go on stage and sing, because I wasn't actually going to have this like a big old like sing-song club sort of thing. I was initially thinking like a club with like gangsters and like snooker tables like with cigar smoke that you could cut with a knife, and I actually did that at one point where they go up and see Dino the Rat, who was the person that was paying them, of course. They were like smoking cigar after cigar, and I made them a little horny, so they took a big old drag. I was like, suck me harder, daddy. And there was all this smoke that was in the air, and they just sort of like cut it with a butter knife and just like pushed it out so they could see what was going on, as well as all like the ladies that was around him. But going back to Tommy Guncat, I made this like a proper club where there were like singers and dancers, so I can integrate that character's backstory a bit more to make the player feel a bit seen, and you know, so they didn't feel that they really had wasted time. It was validating what they were doing here. So there were musicians on the stage who were again all smoking, all like real laid back cool jazz sort of thing. I know for the 20s and 30s it's like what, like 30, 40 years out of date, but I was going for greasy, grimy sort of things. Like, even the cigars are like wheezing cigars. They weren't too great with their draws here. They didn't work out too well here, being nice and flattering. So then they went for the more threatening position and like pulled out like 2 guns from their purse and like threatened them that way around. So this led to a loony roll just to materialize these 2 guns out of nowhere, which they did really well. And then with a threat roll that they did, they also did really well. And I think was a threat roll that was a feely stat. Yeah, that's it, because that's like the charming socializing one, so that worked really well. And then I made them do another feely roll for the singing, and they too got a great success. So they were able to do it with style. They turned everybody around, and everyone was like getting up and jiving all down the, you know, having a good old time that way around. And we also played into the fact that it was these like upbeat tempos that Dilly Dally Dildo was like fucking his new best mates with as well. Just all lovely fun stuff. And Merc decided that they were just going to get in a fight with someone. There was no reason. It wasn't they were trying to talk to someone and somebody like took it the wrong way. It was quite literally, I'm going to go and fight somebody. There's only Scottish tricycles here. It's like, why Scottish? Why tricycles? I don't know. But that's what they went with. So we had a bit of a showdown going on here. And I didn't make note of everything that happened here, but I basically just put down win bold, which refers to the Surly's hit, and they got a bit of money from that tricycle. I think it was like a couple $100 or whatever, and now that tricycle is now indebted to them. Yeah, that was a bit of fun, and there's like people like cheering on, they got circled, like quickly formed round in like cartoon style sort of thing, like fighting and bottles being thrown or whatever. So it kind of looked like a scene from Cuphead, honestly, just a bit more violent, because there's a big old chomping scene with like the front, whatever the fucking lid thing with all the engine is on the car. I've completely, the bonnet, there we go, big old chomping with the bonnet sort of thing. And so it was nightmare-filled stuff if you're a kid, I guess, but it was just a lot of fun to see all of that unravel. And then when everybody had a bit of something to do, because if you know me, if I do a one-shot or any sort of like opening scene, I try and give a player something to do in a scene before we like move on to the actual plot, so they feel like interacting the world and it's making it their own, and it's just sort of like creating a bit of a buzz or an atmosphere to this glory hole club. And then when all of them had a bit of something to do, I then another note form, large rat gangsters, thick as a bus, 2 at a time, approach each of you and insist you follow them upstairs. The boss wants to speak to you, i.e. it's now time to move forward with the plot. But Dilly Dally Dildo decided it was a more hole to fuck, so they were going to try and flirt with the gangsters and fuck with them, quite literally. So this is basically our bard player who's going to try and screw everything. And I got a little annoyed with this, purely because I had made it clear I was moving the plot forward. It was a bit funny, admittedly, especially when they did really badly, and I put them in a cock cage. Which is clue number 1, you need to stop being horny now and pay attention with the plot. And because we had Dino and the pimps and all the like the high-fighting ladies around him, he wanted a desire to get out of the cock cage to try and like fuck them right there and then with the meeting that was going on. And I don't think it was malicious. I think they were just like trying to be into character, and they were in this club for this one purpose. Well, 2, because there was 2 women there. Might have been 3, I remember. They were going to take them off and have a fun time. So I knew how I was going to handle that, so I let them do the loony roll. I gave it high difficulty because I really keeping them in place, and they had to like squish through the bars. And they did manage to do it. But when they did that, I then had them meet the gun, like, stop them, make them go all flaccid, and had Dino warn them that if there's any more fucking about, he paused, pun not intended, he would, like, have his boys take him out. Like, a little in-game clue that you need to fucking calm down, which he did for that scene. And I'm using he not to represent the player, but he because they made a point saying that the character was masculine as well, so don't anybody claim I'm being transphobic here. The dildo was a male character. That was a very intentional choice, so that's why I'm using that here. So the information was exchanged, you know, the letter was handed out. I didn't do a handout with this one. I don't know why I didn't do that, honestly. I just kind of forgot, so I just sort of like read out what was going on. It was like a little wax like seal sort of thing. They kind of got the idea. It was a bit gothic in places because I didn't tell them the name of the adventure. I didn't want to give it away that it was to do with vampires. But they got like old-timey-wimey sort of thing from that, and it looks really old, and they thought, oh, maybe it's like some fucking vampire or something, and they all just stopped and looked at me. Lord, if you put a fucking vampire in this, and I just went... So they did work it out, and it was a bit fun to have that, but I wasn't going to fucking say anything. It could be a zombie, it could be all sorts of things. It could be like some snobby Aristocat. And I think actually somebody did mention a fat cat. Maybe it's some sort of rival fat cat, you know, real classic rivalry. So there was that just to spook things up a little bit. And then we moved over to Meowsferatu proper, you know, described Posh Plaza a little bit, just added a bit more to the rundown sort of shenanigans. Like there was these little mouse kids sort of thing throwing up because they had like bottles in their hand and sort of like played things up in a really stupid manner. Which they thought, again, was really fucking grim. I turned the man into like this big old gothic, like mansion, Transylvanian sort of shit, just to lean in a bit more that we're dealing with vampires here. And the first thing they were going to do is try and locate, what was her name? Rosaline Rosebud III. Thinking, well, she's a flower, so they've probably planted her in a garden. And I don't remember what I said initially when I was planning this out, but it wasn't a garden or a greenhouse, and I remember thinking to myself, why the fuck did I not put that back? That just makes loads of fucking sense. Which created a lot of interesting scenarios where they're having to navigate through like winding trees and attacking bushes and vines, and we had a bit of a showdown with like these other dangerous plants, like a bunch of pansies, because it was like the first fucking flower that came to mind, which went really well. The team didn't manage to get any bonks with that. I'm saying teen gangsters, whatever you want to call them. I'm calling them the group or game, whatever, you know who I mean. And they were managed to rescue Rosaline Rosebud III, because between them and this maze and Rosaline, I had set up this big old winding vine and like rose thorns, like trying to break them through. And Tommy and Mercedes had this idea, well, we're in a car, right? So why don't we just like drive through it and just shoot all the things by either side? And whilst we're doing that, Queen of Clubs can like just squash the maze behind us so we can actually not get lost again, which is a really nice idea. I think a bit of teamwork happening here. And they all sort of laughed at, why didn't we just get fucking Queen to squash everything before we did that? It's just one of those things. But they managed to do really well, Mercedes and Tom, like driving through and like shooting things either side. And I also had it that Rosaline felt indebted to Tommy Gun Cat here, purely because, you know, from the perspective of things, like they were the one that was driving the car, like she didn't really acknowledge that the car was like sentient, which sort of like bugged everyone else. Like, Tommy's gonna get some pussy, you know, real childish shit like that. It was fun and it was nice, and it made the player feel validated that they actually did a good thing and they're acting as a hero, a bit of a redemption arc for their character. So you see your Lord and Saviour does pay attention to these sort of things. However, from here onwards, things would go really, really badly for the group. They chose the wrong robot wife, which was funny because everyone's reaction was just a very nonchalant about it, because they just thought it was really weird that Dina basically had these mechanized sex dolls. And because they were saying that, and they're talking about, oh, I wonder what sort of things he's had up there, I just said, oh, there are whole sorts of fucking sex toys up there, and it's really sticky in some places, like really perving the mouse up a little bit. You know, just feeding to what the players are suggesting, and ultimately it's what they were wanting. And then they were unable to save the cake woman, whose name I didn't write down, but yeah, I wrote down fucking Rosaline Rosebud, probably because I was really proud of the alliteration there. They didn't save her in time because there were like some other cake goods and a big old spinning like grinder meat thing, only it wasn't meat because it was to do with pastry. I was a bit inspired by that one section in Conker's Bad Fur Day when Conker becomes a vampire and you're like feeding the villagers to the vampire ancestor of yours, and again there's that big old grinder in the floor, like just squashing them down to be like all pastrified into this bigger cake. But they didn't manage to save her. So basically, as one of my players eloquently put it, 2 of the 3 bitches bit the dust. And they were debating whether it was actually worth going back because, you know, Dino was really keen about having his 3 bitches back there, his most prized of ladies. Rosaline, who they had waiting outside, so they didn't have to endure this because they went to the garden first and then they just kept them all the way around there. And they decided to leave Queen of Clubs out then, so they didn't have like another loony roll to get them inside the house, because maybe they just like keep an eye on her, like keep her safe actually within the club, which was actually a really neat idea. And so they didn't get bored. I would every so often throw like zombies and skeletons at Queen of the Club in a healthy manner, and through other loony roles they've like spouted out people in drag acts and gays and queers and all other sorts of people like as backup support, which I think was a really neat use of their character. So they were doing all that outside and everybody else was doing all the stuff that was inside, and the rest of the players were trying to think, okay, we can't fucking go back, we're going to get fucking killed, etc. and so forth, but we're here now trying to find the Nosferatu. They found out that the whole thing was a ruse just to get the guest, mouse, whatever, depending on who was ever going to come, to get their blood all energized because they've been running around the house a little bit and it makes the blood taste better. But now they've got to kill them as they're like running all the adrenaline up with fear and all that rest of the stuff. And I was prepared for a big old fight because remember, we've got the room for the blood, we've got all the NPC tricks, and somebody went, actually, counter proposal, and they basically negotiated with Nosferatu that you don't know anything about the world about you, you need people to help you, why don't we bring you women, providing we can have some fun with them and you pay us for that. And it worked. And everyone was alright with that. And they went out of the house to negotiate it in character with the Queen of Clubs to see if that was an alright thing. And they managed also to convince Rosalind that it was going to be an okay thing as well. And she ended up like fronting the club as well, like she had a new purpose in life. And that was how the session ended, that they now worked for Nosferatu, and I did the whole really cheesy, I would meet you with my child, or come here and let me suck your blood, like wrap him over the cape sort of thing, like one after another. Next. It was real fucking stupid. I mean, did it with House as well, broke the teeth, a little door had little fangs that poke out of the door. But that was how that session ended. They essentially chose the bad ending that I didn't account for. And it was great. And they thought that's what I wanted them to do. And it's like, no, you just ended up doing really badly and just came with a really nice solution out of it. Because when you were talking about, oh, we've done really badly, what we do, I was expecting them to like escape out of town, and I was preparing in my mind for a car chase, and that's when the conversation happened, or shortly afterward, and I thought, bravo, really creative solution there, and really looping things round to everyone's core motivation. Sex and lust, the filthy bastards. 10 out of 10 experience. And there you have my takes, opinions, thoughts, and presentation and all that stuff about how to run Helluva Town using an actual example with actual players, using an official adventure hook that I wrote, that I then expanded wider than your mum's arsehole to create a wonderfully high-octane, silly shenanigans which we all had a lot of fun with. And I'll just make the joke again, we had a hell of a good time. I haven't run a TTRPG that's had this much fun and wacky silliness as this, but also a lot of really serious stuff as well, which I definitely lent into in places, but of course, being a game about cartoon characters, you're probably going to lean more in the direction of it being, well, silly cartoon. But just remember some of those more mature settings. Remember that there are elements of horror in it, as we talked about with the art book earlier on. So do lean into that. Like, perhaps not too much, otherwise it makes it still a little less... well, it makes it feel more grounded, actually, now I think about it. But it's about finding that right balance, and it's also part of making the players feel it is their town, it is their world, and like being able to have the freedom and the flexibility to do what they want. Because, as I've said already, the moment that you give your plot to the players, it's theirs. Like, I know I say that this is my adventure, but it's not really mine. It's for anybody to do whatever they want with it and just to have lots of fun with it, however they want to have fun with it. And when you're throwing into the wacky elements of cartoon characters, you cannot control anything. Like, the literal fucking world is their oyster, far more so than any other TTRPG, because of the lack of guidance, the rules, and etc. and so forth. Things I talked about earlier on in this video. And I can't wait to run more sessions of Helluva Town. And I'm seriously debating taking this to my local game store come RPG Day and running it there for free RPG Day. Like, buying some extra cards and just like seeing how people out in the wild interact with this game. But I do definitely want to be running this game again. I do want to come up with more wacky scenarios. Sure, I'll probably be using my own adventure hook in places as well, because I'm just really proud of that. And I don't know if you noticed, but I can't stop talking about it. And just seeing what other people make with it, and like the different ideas and things they come up as well. So I can't wait to be running more Helluva Town, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions about this, because I know this is a fairly niche game. I am expecting this video to flop, one, because it's like one of my long fucking how to run TTRPG videos, 3, because for some reason a lot of my videos aren't doing well, like analytically wise at the moment, which is very frustrating. And thirdly, it's a niche indie TTRPG, and unfortunately I don't think it's getting the recognition that it deserves, and I really want people to be playing this. I mean, if you get the quick start rules, you can just play straight away, like there's no additional rules really that you need for it, so there's no reason why not to play this and just have fun with Cartoon Gangsters. And I want to hear all your thoughts and opinions about Helluva Town in the comments below. The good, bad, the ugly, and the absolutely fucking bizarre. Have you played it? Have you run it? Tell me about some of your characters. Have you run Toon, which I've mentioned a couple of times, because there's a second edition in the works now, which of course I put some of my money towards for the whole crowdfunding process, and I'm really looking forward to doing something unique with that as well. Do you want me to run Helluva Town for you? You want me to run Toon for you? I'd be really interested to see what the general vibe for Helluva Town is on the Lord by Night channel, because of course I'm going to be doing my review of it soon, and, you know, talking more about Helluva Town, so it's not going anywhere, but I'm just really intrigued and interested and excited to see what you lot think about it. And also, just fucking go and play the game. It's fucking great. I'm going to leave it down in the description below for you to go and purchase, as well as the website you can go and find the other bits and pieces for, presumably, because I know at some point it was just the book that's up there and the art book, so hopefully the animator screen and the cards that they were doing for it as well are going to be there as well. So do check out their website, and do check out the DriveThruRPG link down in the description below. Now, if you purchase the Helluva Town PDF via the DriveThruRPG link, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate on DriveThruRPG, and that sort of coin is going to help to develop the channel in so many different ways, so I can put more sort of expensive amount of money towards really gorgeous project like this to talk about, to run, to play, and also share all these experiences with you, either in videos like this or running and playing this game with you, because as I keep saying, I would love to play this game with you. And who knows, if anybody wants to do a fucking actual play with this, and time zones pending, I'll be more than down of running this sort of thing with you, and like coming up with something really fun with that as well. I think, you know, this is a really cool game to do actual plays with, which is somebody who really doesn't like actual plays, or at least the more narrative direction that a lot of them go into. I think this is a great one to have fun with, you know, and to be really expressive in the narrative field of things. But that's probably a video for another time. If you got the PDF for this already and want to get something else to support me for your DriveThruRPG, be it another book, games, master screen, a pack of cards, whatever that may well be, go and copy the affiliate code down there and paste it in the URL before you add to the cart, and that sort of coinage is going to help me no ends as well. And it means that you get shit and I get shit and you get content like this and games for free. Like, it's a win-win chicken dinner situation for you, my friends. But if you can't do any of that, I totally understand. You know, this is a hell of expensive hobby. And, you know, feeding yourself comes first and all the rest of that. So if you can do that, it's great. But if you can't do that, that's also fine as well. But you should definitely do regardless is give the video a cheeky little thumbs up, subscribe to the Lord by Night channel, and share this video with any and everyone who loves what I do. And I'll see you on the next upload, wherever that may well be for you. Until next time, that's all, Toons!